I can't think of anything. So.
Fair enough. I appreciate it. All right, thanks, Alice. All right, so let's roll through here, guys, and maybe we'll get done 5 or 10 minutes early. So again, if you need to step away, step away. But we're gonna keep going. So we've got Robert's piece up next. I'll give you a few seconds to open that document, open your critique, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. The person who is going to give our plot summary for Robert's piece is not here. So Robert, how about you? No, I'm kidding. Summarize your own piece. Can I get a volunteer to summarize Robert's piece for us, please?
Oh gosh.
Rebellion in the ranks.
I can do it. It's kind of it's an interesting piece.
It's a fun one to try to summarize. Yeah.
All right. Let me pull some things up as well. Yeah. So we find ourselves looking at. Oh boy, we don't even start with Bob, do we?
No, but you could if you wanted to start the summary with Bob. I think. There are a few different ways to talk this through.
Yeah, it's interesting. I'm excited to talk about this piece, but it is yeah. So there are 3 separate timelines. I'm gonna go through each one individually. I think that's just the way it's gonna be easiest for me to talk about it. So first off, we have the Bob timeline. In the Bob timeline, we see Bob, who is kind of a greaseball, a degenerate, only cares about himself, kind of, very selfish. Everyone is worse than me. Poor people are worse for me because they can't work harder. Rich people are worse for me because they think they're better than me. That's his entire outlook on life. And he is a very talented author, and everything he writes comes to fruition in terms of publishing somewhere somehow. Except kind of the last piece, which doesn't, because he dies as he's trying to present it to a board of executives. So then we cut to the piece that he's writing, which now has become reality because everything he writes must become reality. And so we have Beeblebrox, the dictator, and the dictator kind of is there. He's trying to cull the human population, I think is my understanding of it. And in doing so, he pisses off the other side of the faction, which he quickly eliminates. And the third part here, is important. Thank you, Brandon. And then the third part is we go down to Hell. And in Hell, we find the one person that he ever cared about, Tanya, who now has a name placard, Beeblebrox, who he compared her, notably, he compared her just Tanya to a T was Beeblebrox in his name, and then that becomes true. So yeah, again, but and then the rest of them are mostly evil dictators of some sort, and one serial killer, all off of people who are deciding they want to go to hell. And Robert is assigned the mission to go back and to presumably help Beetleborgs maintain the war so they can have more soldiers. And that is where our story ends, with Beetleborgs killing the other council members who are in opposition to him and declaring himself basically emperor. Council eternal, so to say, of the human empire, and going to call these human populations to create an army for hell, is my understanding. Yeah.
Perfect. Thank you. The only thing, and you may have said this and I missed it, the only other thing I want to throw in there, and I don't want to spend too much time on this, the summary level of it, just because I think at least some of our analysis is going to be literally what do you think happened in this story. So there's not much point in arguing about it in this layer. The one thing I want to call out, the moments in hell are the year before, and exactly 1 year before the sci-fi elements with Beeblebrox and the like, right? I believe, because they're in the year 7 million, and when he gets to hell and talks with Hitler, he talks via note cards with Hitler. That's January 1st of the year 6,999,000, and so on and so forth. So I will just throw out that as well as we think about timeline here as well. So anyway, okay. So as you scan this piece, what exactly do you understand to be happening? So these three disparate elements that we have, we have Bob as the writer in something relatively close to a modern day setting. How does he affect the other timelines? How do they interact? What exactly do you understand to be the events of this story? What is happening as all of these pieces converge, I suppose? Is Bob already an agent of hell at the time that he is writing his sci-fi series? Is Bob, by writing the series, manifesting the ultimate destruction of humanity, and so therefore has proven himself to be as evil as everyone else? Is this already something that is happening around that he is an unwitting agent of? Is Tanya already and always Beeblebrox? How do you understand these pieces to fit? Go ahead and start us off, Jared, but I'd like to hear from some other people too, please.
Yeah, sorry, I don't mean to hog the limelight. But,
nobody else had their hand up, so.
Yeah, so my understanding, it is probably wrong, but that's kind of how the story is, I guess, is that the way I took it is that this is Bob's personal hell, is him believing that he is actually, like, because he believes that he is the greatest writer of all time, I think. Mm-hmm. And so his hell is because he couldn't finish the playwright, it became reality. So because that in his mind must be what happens. And so my understanding is that this is the beginning of his like actual punishment in hell, where he's like, oh yes, because I manifested this reality because I am the greatest writer of all time. And then something is going to go terribly wrong and he's going to feel very bad about it. That is my understanding for what's going to happen, my interpretation, and I could be totally wrong.
Okay, so as you scan this, especially with that title, We the Damned, as you scan this, he is brought down into hell where he is going to watch the entirety of humanity basically be destroyed because of the thing that he has created, because he believes that his pieces, his concepts, his writing is so incredibly powerful that there is no other option other than for it to have such a profound effect on humanity.
Yeah.
Yes. Okay. Yeah. Okay, so this is a uniquely designed punishment by the devil to watch him destroy everything that would otherwise, or that regales him as being wonderful or perfect or lovely. Okay. Brandon, how do you scan what's happening here?
Well, it's the same thing that I see the him probably, because in the story we hear the sign of him saying of whatever he writes manifests into reality. So I'm not sure if him himself writing the story of the 7000 AD creating like this reality somewhere else and other, I don't know, verses. I'm not sure if this is considered like multiverse or whatever. That he created all this reality and then somehow the reality he created was starting to slip into his own reality. I'm not sure because it was like really because of the drugs he was taking, or just because he was thinking about it.
Okay. So for you, it's still kind of a struggle as to whether, even to a certain extent, what reality means in this version, right? Like is this sort of the idea of, okay, I have created these things so they sort of exist, or is this, I have created them so now this is the only way that things can go, and it's a bit hard for you to decide which of those is true. Is that fair?
Yeah, it's kind of hard for me to decipher. I'm not sure if it's supposed to be because it's vague or ambiguous, which I don't mind. But we're not getting into critique, so I'm gonna just give that.
Yeah, right now we're trying to decide where we land on it. So, and it's totally fair to say that, that we're not 100% sure, or that there are multiple possibilities. Yeah, absolutely. Thank you. John?
I'll take it differently. I saw it to where he didn't go fully into hell. He went to limbo, as if you read it. And limbo is like one of the first circles of hell, where you have souls who are not there yet. So with the souls that he mentioned, that Bob ran into, they want to take over hell. So he's not fully there yet, but they see potential in him to help them take it over. So basically what Bob was doing in his life and with the story he was writing and how he was writing it and what he was doing in actual real life, they saw potential in Bob to help them to take over hell. So that's why I saw that. And I did research and wrote a story about Dante's Inferno. So that's why I kind of realized everything that was going on a little bit. So that's why.
Sorry.
Yeah, so that's why I got the mindset and what was going on. And then with the long journey, the ladder well down, it took so long because usually you're fall. He's forced to take a ladder, which is its own hell in itself, its own torture.
Yeah, and in taking that ladder, millions of years seem to pass, and thoughts of his mistakes and misgivings on Earth crowded his thoughts. So he's essentially forced to move step by step by step forever, and be going over and over and over his own his own failures or successes, if he's as evil as he seems to think he is. There's that forced nature of I can't get out, I can't escape, but also I can't escape myself in these moments, right? The other thing I'd throw out there, that section is titled Purgatory, right? Which is really interesting to me when we play with the idea that he is on the fucking council of evil, as he goes into, purgatory, often otherwise called God's waiting room, right? The decision of good or bad. The mid-level, he's hanging out with the worst human beings on earth and the babies who never got baptized. Those are the people, I guess, that hang out in which, now that I think about it, one of the things I was playing around with is the idea of the devil and how they're fighting back against hell and everything. But if they're hanging out in purgatory, if they're hiding in purgatory from the devil, maybe that makes more sense, I guess. Which I should have thought about as I was writing my critique, but it hadn't locked in until just now. That maybe they're escaping the devil in some way by being not in his realm. I don't know. But that feels important to me too, that he is being sent somewhere by a specific being who is or is not the devil. And I'm not 100% sure about that either, because it's entirely possible that, he's been marked as someone who can be useful, and so therefore someone else comes to grab him. Or maybe the devil's just fucking outsourcing, and so he's getting undercut from the start. I don't know. Outsourcing has always felt pretty fucking evil to me, so it seems like something the devil would be involved in. And so he's allowing this revolt to happen by not watching his minions. I have no fucking idea, but somehow he is forcibly sent to this place. Whether that's the devil or not, that felt like an open question to me. Sent to this place, which is purgatory, which is where all the most evil people are hiding, I guess, because purgatory, everyone's so milquetoast that they wouldn't fight back. I don't know, whatever. To then be put into this place where he is chosen as one of the most evil but maybe he's a lackey of, but maybe he created it. There are a lot of questions, and these are interesting questions, right? This is not the story is failing because there are questions. That's not how we're playing around with this. It's that we have to make some decisions, right? We as readers have to make some decisions about where we land on things. Courtney?
I agree that it's really just a purgatory of his own design, but it's so interesting that there are so many elements throughout. Tanya's talking about all of these different murderers that she's admired from her past, and they all just happen to be sitting at this table when he arrives in this purgatory. And then we come to find out later that he is coupled with Tanya, and it feels like it's almost based on Tanya's design that he's latched onto and locked into, and his only escape then is to go with her.
Interesting. So to you,
She's kind of
is
the gatekeeper in my head.
the gatekeeper. Okay, is this sort of? Do you view this as like her plan, her strategy, her goals that he then just like latches onto, or is this sort of his viewpoint of who he thinks she is, maybe, or?
To an extent. I also think that a lot of it is his manifestation and the works that he's produced and like the deeds that he's done in his past that have gotten him to this point. But I do think that she is pulling a lot of the strings from behind the scenes and he's just kind of having to go along with it.
Okay. I definitely can see that as a fair scan of it, essentially, or especially when like she needs him to be at the office to talk to the people. She is, coercive, convincing in all of these ways. I can very much imagine her having given him the original idea of Beeblebrox or whatever, right? Like, because that is who she is.
And he doesn't even really recognize her existence until immediately after he passes. And in that scene where he is out of body and like everyone around him is frantic and like waiting, he looks to her. And I feel like that tells a lot in that moment. And then she kind of guides everything from there on out.
Interesting. I like that scan of it, especially because like there's the idea that they're going to go back as partners, and presumably that's supposed to be him and Tanya. But like, if that's true, then his role in the year 7 million is to be the senator that she stabs, that she kills, right? Like, I mean, that's the only way that I can imagine it is to be like one of the Bork or Breck or whatever his name is, the dude who's like, the non-interventionist who like finally fights back hard enough that the Beeblebrox decides to take over everything or something. I guess. It's interesting to me because Tanya gets that role, right? Tanya gets the big role at the end.
Well, because he's a vessel that she can easily enough manipulate.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, I can certainly I can see that scan. I can see that reading. Absolutely, Nathan.
That reading makes a lot of sense. For me, I read this piece as kind of like widely like parody satire. Like it's meant to be funny, like because it's so absurd in a way. Like this dude is an absolutely horrible human being. There's like this space war with the Romans going on, and then he like overdoses on cocaine, dies, and then like gets sent to hell where he's like with all these horrible, evil historical figures that have murdered people, and his job is just to like finish the story that he was writing. It is definitely like a personal hell thing, so I agree with that part. I also thought that it was what was it? I thought that the connection between like Tanya and Bob was interesting too, because Tanya, she seems like she only gets one section, but that section tells you a deep amount of like her character being like she's Machiavellianist, and it does make sense that she like would be Beeblebrox, but it is a little hard to it's a little hard to tell like if the purgatory thing is just like Bob hallucinating while he's like still half alive, or if he's like actually died and like in hell now, and if because I didn't read the manifest into reality line as literal at first, so when this all happened it took me a few reads to understand that this isn't just like I don't know him overdosing on cocaine. I think it's actually him being sent to like purgatory and hell and having to manifest his own story using himself as a sacrifice, I guess.
Mm-hmm. Okay. I guess I'll just throw this out now just because enough people are on the other side that I might as well counterbalance just slightly. Not that it matters, because any one of us could be right or wrong, and the story still needs to be built in various ways to get it to where it wants us as readers to be, or leave it entirely vague, as Haley threw out. This is a meta story, right? There is no way to read this that is not meta. And when we get into critique, I'm going to argue that it should probably be more meta in places. This is a meta story. The main character is Robert Gold. The writer is Robert Gold. The opening scene says that it is written by Bob Gold and another person. So either this is written by multiple people, or we are playing around with the ideas of other characters taking over pieces of the story. So this is an intentionally meta piece. So we absolutely need to be aware of that as we play around with all of these stuff. That said, so it doesn't matter where we land, who's right, who's wrong, but I'm going to take a stand because we all might as well take a stand. I disagree pretty heavily with the idea of this being his personal hell, him being thrown into a personal purgatory. Does that matter? Not in the fucking slightest. I'm wrong all the goddamn time. That's fine. to me, I read this as a sort of like puzzle box kind of story where we're given all of the pieces and then we are slowly being given more pieces into how they fit together, right? Where so for me, that everything manifests into reality line is the most important line in the story, because to me, once he wrote it, it now has to be manifested. And so now the universe essentially has to figure out a way to manifest reality around the thing that he has created. This feels really important to me because I don't understand how the fuck he is as bad as Hitler. I don't. I mean, maybe that's bad, you know, maybe saying that somebody really Jewed something up is just as bad as like murdering however many million Jews. Maybe it is. Like I struggle with that connection though. Which means to me the only way that he is as bad as all of these other people is if what he did is real. And so in writing this story, in manifesting the destruction of humanity, he is now the ultimate of evil people because the thing has been made into reality. And so therefore he has gotten himself to a place where he goes to hell. If he is bad because he hates people in suits and he's like racist and is just like a general asshole, this feels like a whole lot of work to me to like build an individual hell for one person built around this like concept. Is that impossible? Absolutely not. We saw things like, I mean, The Good Place would be a great example from TV not too long ago of like building a personal hell for absolutely everyone. It's not that hard to do and build, but thinking about this as a meta story, unless this is Robert actively thinking about what Robert's personal hell would be, which it doesn't really feel like is the idea of the story itself, I struggle with that concept of like that being the thematic element of the story itself. There are plenty of other themes and plenty of other ways that it could work, and it absolutely could be that thing. But like being brought to hell so that you can be punished by thinking of yourself as the ultimate evil because you think you're so incredibly important that you must be the ultimate evil, and now you get to think of yourself as equivalent to Hitler and also get to like try to fight the devil and take over, feels almost closer to fantasy than it does to like to failure, right? Like it's not quite the same as having to roll the rock uphill for the entirety of eternity and watching it come down or any of those things. And maybe I'm wrong in that, but that's fine. You know, we can build in plenty of ways to get there. If that's the intention of the story. But for me, I read it as more of a puzzle box piece that put it all together to get us ultimately to understand how all the pieces come together. That's cool. I have no problem with that reading at all, Jared. Like I said, I read it differently, but have no problem with that reading. If that's true, I would want that ending to show up though. I need the devil to actually like show up and laugh at him when he thinks he's destroyed all of humanity at the end. So then we need 2 or 3 more scenes where at the end he's like, I have beaten hell, and the devil's like, no, this is your hell. Start over again. Try and fail. And I have no problem with that. I'm completely down with that if it's there, but it's not there yet. Alice?
I lost my first train of thought. So I was thinking like how they said it's almost like satirical. I was like, he's almost like comically evil, like Bob, but like I think as you said, like I wouldn't necessarily say that would put him in the same place as like, you know, like history's worst people and like murderers. So I guess I was questioning that a lot. And also like in the end, like the idea that there is this strong sense that he feels very self-important, and the ending I'm like, but the ending isn't him. It's a character he created, but it's not him. It's Tanya as People Rocks, and I think that's the name. So I guess that tells me that like maybe he wasn't also important, but I'm not completely sure because he's still the creator of the character.
Yeah, and except that he is or he isn't, because Tanya is already People Rocks, right? And so there is definitely a reading, and so maybe this does play with that other reading of like him as not important, him losing importance. There is a reading where he becomes a lackey at the end. He gets sent back just to like continue the war. He's a soldier in the war, and Tanya was always People Rocks, and has just been using him to get that. I mean, maybe there is a reading where he is less important, or discovering his lack of importance, because like as a writer, he was just writing what other people built him to write, essentially. And he doesn't even factor into the ending or conclusion. I mean, if we're building that argument, it's there. It certainly could be. John?
So I know to most for the story, he made it seem like he didn't do anything as bad, but it was his actions. You know, like each circle of hell has different actions of what you did. You can torture for. Like one of them was gluttony. He was eating all that Popeye just for himself.
Yep.
Also with the drug use, that is basically a sin, and you'll get to that certain level of hell. So yeah, he wasn't killing people and everything, but he was doing that to himself, and then also reflecting, doing things to others. So not just being sent to hell, would gotta go out and kill people, do certain things do to yourself that is considered a sin. And I'm thinking that's where Robert was going with that. That's why one of the reasons why he was sent to limbo, didn't make it to hell, because they saw potential. That council saw potential in Bob on what he could help him provide.
Fair. Man, if cocaine is a sin, I need to reevaluate some life choices. No. I need to stop saying just random things when they pop into my head. That's what I need to do. Yeah, no, I mean, it's interesting, right? Thanks, Nathan. I mean, this is definitely, and I think it's perfectly valid now to step into critique. I think we talked through at least the major possibilities for what this story could be trying to do. It's definitely valid that like we're in this weird place of setting him up as bad or evil, but we're also like, we've got this narrator who's kind of rooting for him, possibly because we recognize him as the author and the narrator, but like we're also in a third person that like sets us up as we're supposed to, I think, be trusting what's said for the most part. And so there's this like we're supposed to believe that he is at the very least a super successful author. I don't think this is a first person that's like, I am a brilliant author, and everyone else is like, you've never published anything, you jackass. Like it seems like we're supposed to trust and believe narratorial intent, but then we're given him on the Council of Evil in all of these ways, and then there's the purgatory and this idea of limbo, and I mean there are a lot of these elements that I feel like pieces of them work for each of our arguments, but I'm not 100% sure that any of us can walk away having proven our argument right now. You know what I mean? And that's ultimately where I think this story is going to need to go. And this is why, as we move into critique, I think this story needs to be more meta. I think that Bob should talk some. I think that there should be an I narrator at certain times, and it should probably either be Bob or it should be Robert Gold, the author, talking about Bob, who is the greatest author of all time, who is also Robert Gold, the author. And we should really play around with some of the zaniness that can happen with metafiction, because so for those of you who aren't familiar, metafiction is simply storytelling about stories, right? Like stories that are self-aware of themselves as story. This piece is very clearly self-aware of the idea that it is telling us a story, that it is playing around with who Bob is. It's asking questions of evil. It's asking questions of what exactly it is that creates or makes evil. One thing we didn't talk about as a possible theme I went through in my critique, and this plays around a little bit with what Nathan was talking about with as far as satire. There's one way to read this, that Bob actually is this evil, and that he is this evil because he says horrible things about like Mexicans and women and Jews and etc. And if that's true, and if we are supposed to take him as evil as Hitler and Pol Pot and etc. for saying these things about other races, genders, classes, then this becomes a satire of cancel culture, right? And this becomes a very specific idea about the way that like people can't say anything anymore, or like, and then the second that you cancel the wrong person, because we've heard this all the time, you cancel the wrong person and they're going to come back and do things to us or whatever. There's a pretty clear build if we want like satire or whatever on that level. where his evil is evil because of the way that the culture views him in this way. Anyway, all of those things exist as possibilities in my mind because the story isn't going far enough to play around with the sort of meta things that it's trying to explore right now. I want the narrator in here. I think I want a bit more of hell in the plan. I think there's definitely there's room to potentially take some things out to replace some things. I don't know that Tanya's section is necessarily doing enough to be there right now, even though I get that she's kind of the entire focus of the piece. But like on a plot level, I'm worried that Bob doesn't have enough to do right now. And some of that comes from like the lack of the meta stuff that we have. We're kind of moving through the motions to understand what's happening. But the pleasure of this story as currently presented comes from figuring it out, right? And there's not actually, as weird as this is to say in a story that's about like potentially the destruction of the human race, there's not actually a ton of conflict built around those moments. Bob dies, does the thing that he's told to, writes the story, and is now part of the Council of Evil. My big critique with this story is that I want to see some more conflict played into these elements. I want to see more things that Bob has to like make some decisions about. Think about, I mean, fuck, he's being told he's as bad as Hitler. How does he feel about that? Is he like, fuck yeah, I knew I was special? Or is he like, all I said was some horrible things about some like people who deserved it anyway? Or is he like sitting here actually considering his life and thinking things? There's room to like explore some of this stuff and play around with it. And we're so focused on the like putting all the pieces together right now that we don't actually have room for the conflict at the heart of the piece, whatever it is. Whether it's learning this is your own purgatory, whether this is learning that you destroyed all of humanity because everything that you create is manifested, whether it's like slowly working through the circles of hell as you become worse and worse, whether it's actually about a battle or a fight with the devil, whether it's, since y'all didn't like my idea of outsourcing, whether it's actually about like the devil forgetting that he's in control of hell and so letting like some minor demon take people and losing control. Whatever it's about, we don't have that conflict here yet. Because I mean, it's an early draft, as these things are. It's still trying to figure out like the mechanisms of the piece itself. But in that next draft, I really want to see some challenges to Bob presented, whether it's in his own mind or in the actions of the story. What else did you guys want to see here? Where else did you struggle? What else, as we think about critique here, what else did you need help with? What other questions did you have? What didn't quite make sense to you, Nathan?
This is partially a reading comprehension thing on my part, but I think a little more clarity on whether or not the Bob manifesting into reality thing is actually real. Because as I said before, I didn't even pick up on how important that line was until we got to the whole part where it's like, this whole reality is actually happening in real. I think maybe maybe Bob has written, he seems like the type of guy to like write about, I don't know, something his mom did and then like writing that she dies in the story and then she actually would die in real life. Maybe that could be like some kind of pseudo conflict. Like, he writes something like in a rage, it gets super popular, like maybe that person realizes doesn't like it, they die like 3 days later, that like causes minor emotions within him. I think some indication of whether or not the manifest into reality thing is real before it actually starts happening would let the reader know that this is like, whether or not this is like him, I don't know, being coked out, or whether or not it's him being actually turning into like the next Hitler, because he's just genociding the entire human race in 7 million AD.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, and I feel like, one of the things I love about this story is the extreme energy of it, right? The way that it is just like pinballing through ideas. I want to see that. If that line is as important as I thought it was, which I don't even know that it is, but if it is as important as I thought it was, let's see an example that he is aware of things manifesting into reality, right? For instance, there's the line about her, Tanya, loving the book, how to make friends and influence people or whatever. If he wrote like a shitty half-ass version of that's just for artists about like, how to go to Hollywood and make millions off of your first book, and then he made millions off of that book, so he's now convinced that he is manifesting everything into reality, so he goes and writes a drama about like climate change where temperatures are rising 1% over 100 years, and so like that's now true too, even though it was already true, or whatever, and like slowly builds himself into this thing. Or if literally he wrote, as you're saying, you know, when he was 5 years old, he wrote the story about the way that his mom fell into a well trying to save Lassie, and then the next day she like accidentally trips into a pool of water, and he's like, oh shit, I like control the world, and he's now like, my crush wants to have sex with me every Tuesday at 3, and so now he's like actually raping people accidentally. You know, like, those are different things. Those are very different ways that those sentences work, if that's what the sentence is doing. And if it's not, you know, rephrase the sentence slightly and we can get there pretty easily. But like, you can go super dark while still being like satirical and funny. And we've seen Robert do that already. Those of us in beginning fiction saw him do it last quarter. It's not a problem. And I know Robert was a little bit concerned with the scam that some people would have because of like some of the things that he threw in here. And so I like what we're saying about, you know, this character, it makes sense to go dark and to let them be there. So use it or don't use it, right? Like build a story around it if it's going to be there. And I appreciate that scan from us as readers, coming in, thinking about what's most valuable for the writing. That should always be where we are. So I really appreciate the way we're coming at this too. Alice?
Yeah. I think it was mentioned that he's sitting around like these like how he's sitting around this table with like the most evil people in the world, and when he's told he's gonna have a partner, I guess we like finally get into his mind again, like, oh, like why does he need a partner? Like is he gonna babysit this like historical figure, or so on. And I don't know if it was just me. It just felt a little like a strange shift in tone, because like I would think that he would like, because he's just like, you know, like taking the ladder down to hell. And he's faced with all these like terrifying people, and that's like the first thing, the first thing we get of his thoughts again. And it was just a little like jarring to me, I guess.
I think it's how like easily he just like slides into his role, right? Like everything has changed, and you're like, cool, okay, cool. For me, I really agree. I found that moment strange because I expected some level of introspection, whether it's like, fuck yes, I'm amazing, whether it's like, I can't believe I'm here, whatever it specifically is. He just like, I mean, that's what happens. I guess sometimes Hitler shows up and won't talk to you, but sends you note cards. It happens. Brandon?
Yeah, I was going to say, since you've been like constantly talking, I would definitely say that for me, it was kind of hard to see Bob, being in this council, because I really didn't see him like doing anything horrible or doing something like detestable, like to go like up there to the greatest people that we don't like, or the greatest people of Earth. Like I really don't see his actions as like, yeah, what he does in the story is bad, but it's like not bad as the other historical people. So yeah, I think a bit more like going deeper to like Bob's mind and see why he's like considered evil by the Council of Evil, and why they allow him to enter. They just allow him to enter to use him, or they also want him to be in the Council of Evil because he is also evil.
This story's in first person. Specifically thinks of Bob as evil, or where his badness in his mind comes from, or in the mind of the story comes from, I think would be really, really, really helpful. Courtney, I saw your mic go on and off for a second. Did you have something you wanted to jump in with?
I think you froze for a moment, so we missed the beginning of what you said.
Yeah, you froze. I'm sorry. I was like asking myself.
I think where I started was Brandon's comment there pushes me even further to wanting some level of first person in the story, to wanting the narrator's views or Robert's views on Bob, and what specifically makes Bob, allows Bob to be if he is, or what puts him into the place where he is. I can see this being a story that like slips back and forth between third and first, where like sometimes Bob is talking about himself in the third person, and sometimes Bob just like himself to be the author who is, you know, pulling all the strings on his own story, so therefore aggrandizing himself even further than he actually is in various areas. Courtney?
I think what might aid that, as well as maybe adding some first person, would just be giving Bob, his character, a little bit more agency and more moments in order to choose conflict, because right now he just feels very apathetic with everything that's happening around him. And so to give him more instances where he can interject or challenge what's happening would give him more agency and then drive more conflict, as well as give us a better view as to how he's handling the circumstances and situations.
Yeah. Which comes back to, I mean, we need some conflict in here, right? As weird as it is to say, we are moving through moments that don't allow choices. And if they do allow choices, we're ignoring the choices. Like, does he have a choice to say no to Hitler? I didn't really get the sense that he did, but also he's just like, okay, cool, I'm on board so quickly that maybe we didn't know. I need some moments with some decisions. Tanya contorts him into coming to the meeting. In the meeting, he simply explains the scene. Then he dies. Then he goes and is told what he's going to do, and he does that. That for me is not enough. And really, it's hard. Especially, I get it in early drafts. It's hard to put this all together. But the real weakness of this story right now, in my opinion, is that plot/conflict level, right? Like I think Bob makes some sense. We're missing pieces of him, but he makes sense. The way that this all puts together, there are plenty of like ideas for themes and arguments that we can get. The world itself seems pretty fully established. I like the way that we're jumping through the scenes and the times, but it's about getting that conflict in here and that final piece of like, I mean, it feels bad to say this, but that sort of why now moment exists here as well. And even to a certain extent, the so what moment, like why are they deciding to battle hell in this moment? Why is this the moment that humanity ends? If it's just because we have one person who has the ability to manifest ideas into reality, and like humanity proves itself to be dumbasses and can't handle that power, so like that one person is going to destroy everything, okay, but I need that argument made. If it's the personal health thing, okay, but why are we seeing Bob as opposed to literally anyone else? If this is a critique of like, you know, cancel culture or the culture wars or whatever, okay, fine. You know, we've got the whole thing about the gender wars even still existing in the year 7 million. So clearly this dude Bob at the very least is over here like, we're never going to get past like men versus women, man. Like, you know, there are ways to get there, but I need to see some help through decisions being made in the story. What else, guys? Where else did you struggle? I think it's fair to even ask, what other questions did you have, like about like the logistics of how this all worked or the world? For me, one of my paragraphs was just, I bet there will be a lot of questions about this story. Here are all of mine. Where are some other pieces that you were struggling with, or that didn't quite make sense to you? Yeah, Jared.
Yeah. So you built Bob, I think actually pretty well, especially in the beginning. You know, you made him very dislikable, very like, you know, self-egotistical, and then he dies, and like every character trait that we know about Bob disappears. Like the angel comes and sucks his soul, and he's like, yeah, this is fine. I'm not going to argue with it. I'm not going to do anything about it. I'm just going to sit here and come down, and I'm going to, you know, patiently walk down and then try to jump down the stairs. He doesn't have any dialogue at this time, which is weird because, like, in my mind, this character put into this situation would be like, who the fuck is this angel-looking motherfucker who thinks he can tell me what the fuck I need to do? Mm-hmm. But we don't get that. We get like, oh yeah, I'm dead. Okay, I guess I'm sad because I guess Tanya kind of liked me. That's unfortunate. And then he just goes down, and it feels like a betrayal of what the character is, almost. So yeah, that was. I don't know if there's like a reason for that or if it was just weird.
Yeah. As I'm thinking about that moment, I guess the way that I tried to make it make sense was that he's being forced down. Like like that he has no control over the moment. But like, if that's true, then we have even less control or agency for the main character, right? Which is potentially problematic if it doesn't ever come back. So yeah, that feels like a super essential moment, especially when he like goes down for what feels like millions of years and turns out to be millions of years, as he's wandering down. And then like, I mean, he wanders down to the year 6,999,999 and discovers that all of the most evil people in existence are people he recognizes, which is really interesting. And so, I mean, maybe that does come down. I think that plays with either of our interpretations of the story, either as his own personal hell, because of course he knows everyone and nothing's continued past him, or as him having destroyed the human world, right? Because essentially nothing important happens in humanity until the year 7 million, because he wrote the sci-fi story about the year 7 million being the destruction of humanity. But yeah, it is strange that we're just like, guess time will pass here, I guess, and we'll just move forward. But it again does what the story does in a lot of places, and this is the problem with puzzle docs stories. You have to get to a certain thing, and so the agency of the character ends up taking second shrift. It's something we'll have to play around with and figure out as the story evolves. Yeah, and I think that's totally fair, Jared. Like I said, I think that plays well into the arguments for either of our thought processes. There you go. Look at that, Nathan. He actually deserves to. St. Peter should let him in the good place instead. He saved us all. He saved everyone he knew by dooming people he doesn't know. Which, you know, I think many of us would make those choices, right? If we had to kill humanity in 6 million years, but got to save everyone we know, there's a logic puzzle for us. Is that good or is that bad? I don't have an answer for that. Other things that we struggle with here. What else doesn't quite land for us? Where else can we help this piece? We talked through theme for quite a while, which is also some of where our difficulties are, but that means we haven't had as much of an opportunity to dive into critique as we would with other places. So please take the opportunity here, guys. Yeah, Courtney.
I wasn't certain I understood who Beeblebrox was, and if Tanya was Beeblebrox the whole time, or if only at the end, like there was this like transition between the two, and then what the purpose of having them both resemble the same character was.
Mm-hmm. That leads into the question: why do we have Beeblebrox at the beginning, right? Like, if it like starts out as a script until it becomes real, until it becomes whatever, or because we have that scene which has been written out, and then he goes and he talks to the agents and he's like, so let me tell you about what the final scene will be. So they haven't read the scene; they've read a explanation of the script, I guess, or something. But it's already been manifested, unless somehow they greenlit it because they felt bad for him because he died, and so it hasn't actually been written or manifested until after his death. I don't know. But yeah, I think it's a fair question to ask. If we have Beeblebrox at the beginning and at the end, and there's the third section too, are they always the same? And why are we splitting that scene if they are? And if they're changing as reality itself changes, I don't know that we necessarily have a hint to that. And if they're all the same, I'm not necessarily sure we have a hint to that either. Yeah, keep going.
The only sort of hint that I got was in what I would call the footnotes, where they both start with kind of the phrase intergalactic. So I assumed that they were from the same work and were pulled and just consolidated at the beginning and the end. But again, I don't really know what purpose that serves and what that leads itself to in the story.
Yeah, no, that's the thing, right? Does it have the? I don't remember offhand. Does it have the by Bob Gold each time?
No, that's just the first one, but they both have the title Intergalactica. They just have the by Arthur and Bob at the first one, but then it comes back to Intergalactica again.
Okay. Got
what
it.
That means, I don't know.
And if it matters, I don't think that it matters, but if it matters, Galactica is capitalized the first time and not the second time. So I don't know if that suggests that it was just a story and then it became real or not. I think I'm probably reaching way too far.
No,
Especially
it's capitalized the second time. Chapter 5 on page 10.
okay, sorry, chapter 7 it is not capitalized.
Oh,
So,
okay.
okay, so if it is the second time, then probably the third time is just a quick typo then. Or that's the time when it's actually become real. I don't know. Again, this is the thing about these kind of pieces that we have to, until they're locked in completely, we have to make some assumptions. But yeah, I think they read so similarly, like scene by scene by scene, that the only thing I can really do with that is my understanding of it has changed, which seems to suggest that it has always been there and always been true, or that it has never been there and never been true. And so I suppose it's possible that again lends into the reading of this as personal hell if this has always been a story and it's still a story. And so maybe when he sees her as Beeblebrox, that's his like, oh shit, they're using my stories against me or something, but he's still on board with it. So I can't really read it that way. Yeah. Last thoughts here. Anything else we can, any other places we struggle that we should talk through? Any things that you didn't, that didn't quite land or that you have as far as suggestions for the piece? For me, it's about going much more meta here. I want to utilize the weirdness that you can explore in meta so that this doesn't just become a puzzle box piece, but instead can play around with conflict and really build Bob and who he is as a result. I love the idea of playing around with third and first, maybe like accidentally falling into first every once in a while, as Bob realizes that he's telling his own story or something like that. I think that it could make some sense. Or alternately, now that I think about it, especially since Robert Gold is writing the story, if you fell into first when you were describing Tanya so that it became clear that Tanya is pulling the strings on all of this, when she falls into first, accidentally talking about herself and then is like, shit, I'm telling a story that I'm not involved in or whatever. I think that actually might be really interesting if Robert Gold is writing the story of Bob, but Tanya is the person who is writing the story, who is controlling the story. That would be a really fun way to play with it, actually. But yeah, for me, the next draft is about the next draft in particular is probably about going even further balls to the wall, and then probably third or fourth or fifth draft we're going to start pulling it back to figure out the clear intentional thematics behind the piece. All right, it's 12:47. I'm going to fold Robert in here. If you guys need to leave at 12:50, please feel free to, but we might go a couple 2-3 minutes over. So if you can stay, please do. Robert, questions for us?
Yeah, there were the original idea here was that we were going to spend way more time in the present, and I was going to take a lot more of different stories that I've written, and then by the time Bob gets down to hell, he's just in a council of all the characters he's created, which is his own hell, sort of, and he's stuck there in that boardroom meeting with every fictional person he's ever invented for all eternity. And that's just where we leave him as a character. Mm-hmm. But I thought that I wanted to keep this as a short story, and I didn't feel like I had the time to go into and try to introduce 15 different characters that I've invented in 15 different stories I've invented at different times. And so I try to really streamline this a little bit and simplify it. And so anyway, so my question to you guys is I wanted to know if there were times where you felt bored, or if there were times that things felt tedious, or there are times that you're like, oh my God, the story is really dragging in this one place.
I think I said it already. I didn't necessarily feel like Tanya's section was tremendously helpful to the piece. As currently constructed, which is probably why I ultimately landed on I wouldn't hate floating into an I perspective or something with her, something to tighten that a little bit. But for me, that was the only section. I felt like hers was very heavily summary, and even though I recognize that she's really important as the role later, it didn't quite feel like it was pushing the plot forward as much as I would have wanted. Courtney?
I actually really did like Tanya's section. The part that felt a little, I guess your word was tedious to me, was right after he died and he was falling, and there was this whole thing about the voice in the tunnel and him climbing. It all just ran on a little long for me, and it's beautiful. I love the way that it's written, but I felt like I didn't need all of that per se.
What specifically about Tanya's section landed well for you?
For some reason, I really liked her character, and I feel like it did lend itself to my belief that Tanya was kind of pulling all the strings all along. We only see Bob's perspective on things, and then to get a shift so drastically in the middle to this other character who we get a full fleshed out understanding of, it bums me out that we don't see her again. But I like the way that it's written. I like the way that it's formulated, and really fleshing out these characters lends itself to a lot of different things. And especially if this is just one section of this, you can kind of expand the two of their relation a little bit more, especially since we don't get a lot of in Robert's other works, because I have him for playwriting. It's got like I've read a lot of Robert's works, just a lot of character definitions. I feel like a lot of it is just plot focused and conflict based, and so it's really interesting getting to see the scopes of these characters to me.
I think that's fair. I want an event in her scene. I want an action in there, and if that happens so that we're not just explaining who she is and why she is, but we are doing something to push the story forward, then I'm fine with that. But for me, I think that was the ultimate struggle. There was nothing happened in her section. So make something happen, and I'm cool with that. Are there other places where you guys bumped that felt slow or tedious, or not as rushing through the moments? Because I very much felt, as I do with a lot of Robert's work, I felt like this is, we're kind of always on edge in this story. Like, so many things are happening. We're going. Are there any places that did potentially to you feel like they slowed you down a bit too far?
I had the same read as the professor here, where I was like, when we were doing the Tanya part, I was like, why are we here? And then I never felt like that was fully answered in the Tanya part.
Okay.
So that slowed down for me a lot.
Okay. So if we can throw an event in there, if we can get something happening, I think that's a moment to shore up. And then, I think what Courtney's talking about the moment after death, I don't know that we're doing enough there to have him like playing around with the possibilities of that moment. Like, I am being brought down to hell. Here is the angel. We're moving through the moment, but it's pretty clear that we just need that to get to the council. And so if we can get something of Bob in there as well, that'll be a place we can punch up some. Nathan, talk through the second scene.
I think the second scene, it mainly consists of Senator Thaddeus Blake. There's a typo actually, I just realized in the first line. He kind of throws out a lot of these names like the Goldilocks Zone, Bucco, E Pluribus Unum, and that is the main brunt of this paragraph. He only says, the only important thing I see here is, this empire was not built to line the pockets of military contractors. These are all obviously, like, in a play, they'd be totally fine because, like, it's a fun line to hear and it's neat. But as far as contributing to this piece itself, I think the reader focuses more on Bob, Tanya, and this whole purgatory thing. So you could definitely, this is probably the part I'd say is least important to the story, just overall. And it can be like, I think the last lines can be like moved to the first or third scenes, or it can be removed completely. Just have that Thaddeus Black like start in the very beginning, and then in the very end, hook it right back in as your story's frame, I guess. That's just my thoughts or recommendation, I suppose.
Perfect, thank you. Robert?
I don't want to keep anyone like too long. I know the more questions I ask, the longer people have to stay. But I'll say that I appreciate everything that everyone said. Haley, hopefully you enjoyed seeing Beeblebrox again. And anyone who took beginner's fiction with me last quarter, hopefully you enjoyed seeing a different metafiction iteration of Robert Gold. And anyway, I appreciate everyone's feedback. Thank you, guys.
Cool. Thank you so much. All right, guys. Thank you. I apologize for keeping us a couple minutes over. I do feel like that opening 15 minutes was important to talk through, though. I'm going to send that email out in my break between the two classes. If I haven't sent y'all an email before next week, ask me about it, and we'll see what happens. Maybe they'll just maybe they'll get rid of it entirely. Maybe maybe Josh will shut me down from the start, but it seems like we have enough numbers that there should be an extra class. If we've got, because a couple of you sent me some other names as well. If we've got something like 11 students just out of nowhere, that's going to be a full class. I don't know how you can argue not getting an advanced fiction class. It doesn't matter whether I teach it or not. You guys should have it. I'm going to see what I can do to play around and maybe suggest the professional fiction class too, or instead, or something. But yeah, we'll do the best we can to get you the things we need. You guys should not ever be stuck needing an extra year or an extra quarter